Okay. Give it a second. We are live. Welcome to the About the Labor Show. I'm your host, Sean Borman. With me, as always, is the smartest person at Vikings Territory, Nick, the Professor Olson. How you doing
That kind
today,
of
Nick?
scares me about the rest of the folks of Vikings territory. I don't know what that means.
Oh, no. No, you simply based off your track record of analytical articles, and we don't dive that deep as you do, and it's pretty impressive stuff.
The
But anyway,
nerdiest member of Vikings territory.
I like it. I like it. But we got a lot to get to tonight. Obviously, some huge news breaking as far as the coaching staff goes this week. But first, I want to get to Master in Seattle. I mean, just a horrible Monday night game to watch. It was really bad. Um, I mean, just really, I guess the only positive that I can really take away is on the defensive side of the ball. So we'll start there. Uh, what went well in your mind, Nick, for the Vikings defense Monday night against Seattle, if anything?
The pass defense was great. Russell Wilson is a fantastic passer. A lot of people think of him just as like his threat with his legs, but he's a phenomenal pocket passer as well, just in terms of his accuracy, his strength, how quickly he reads defenses. So he's a fantastic quarterback, and we held him to under 100 passing yards. I thought all the secondary had a good game. Holton Hill especially had a particularly fantastic game in coverage. He had multiple pass deflections. I think he only allowed like 25 yards in coverage, and they were picking on him too, but he wasn't giving anything up. There's that one play, the touchdown throw that he managed to push Seahawks receiver out of bounds. And I think most of the time the offensive receiver drags their feet there and gets the touchdown. So you could maybe not give Holton Hill as much credit for that one. But even without that play, he was a fantastic game in coverage. He did get a little out of place sometimes in run defense. He wasn't quite the Trey Waynes or run stopping corner that we'd love to see. And, that showed up in his Texas tape as well. But good game from him. I thought Rhodes had an up and down game. Pro Football Focus didn't like him, but that's because they punish folks for penalties, and Rhodes had that defensive pass interference penalty, which I personally thought was a bad call.
Oh,
A
terrible.
lot of people said it was like uncatchable, which is true, but I also thought just, he kind of there was some hands fighting, and he kind of grabbed the dude's bicep as he was going up for the pass, and yeah, technically that's DPI. I think also technically, if it weren't Xavier Rhodes, who kind of gets picked on by the refs for this, I think they wouldn't usually call that. So secondary played really well, and the pass rush played well as well. So good game all around from the pass defense. Run defense was another thing entirely, but
Yeah, and it seemed to me, first of all, getting back to Holton Hill, I mean, how impressive has he been? I mean, undrafted rookie free agent to de facto starter. I mean, really impressed with him so far, and that pick is kind of, or I guess the signing is kind of panning out as a lot of us hoped it would. So that's pretty cool to see. And I also wanted to just touch on the linebackers. I thought Barr and Kendricks had an improved game, and they've just seemed to be a little more consistent as of late. You have any thoughts on that, or would you agree?
yeah, definitely. I thought Barr probably had his best game of the year, which kind of sounds like high praise, but at the same time, Barr hasn't had like a flashy year, so he's kind of been like consistently pretty good every week. But this week he finally had a sack. He had some other standout run defense plays. Kendricks obviously had that interception, which good play by Kendricks, but also was like just a terrible, like one of the worst throws all year from anybody from Russell Wilson. So.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, but good game from the linebackers.
Yeah,
Well,
and
I should say Gideon probably had his worst game as a pro, which is unfortunate. But Kendricks and Barr were great. So
that's a good point. I remember thinking multiple times during the game after watching Gideon, like, wow, he just looked out of place and just behind the ball the whole game. Just, not literally, but just not in good position. And like you said, probably his worst game as a pro. And
Yeah, and I think that was Seattle doing that schematically. I think it was Jordan Reed on Twitter, a great Twitter follow, who pointed out that they were kind of following the same blueprint as the 2016 Colts game when Andrew Luck blew us out like 34-7 or something. It was the same deal where they were scheming, two tight end packages, jumbo packages, extra tackles to get keep us in base personnel and then spread us out. And Gideon had trouble. The weird thing is Gideon, he's kind of a traditional two down linebacker. And so you're concerned about him covering tight ends or doing things in coverage, but he's usually an extremely fantastic run defender. I think last year he was top 5 in run stop percentage among all stand-up linebackers, which is obviously that's a high bar. But this game he was getting run over by Chris Carson. He was taking bad angles. He was missing tackles. So just a game to forget for him.
And do you think he was in the game to begin with just because Seattle has such a strong run game and we didn't see more of, Jaron Curse or people like that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even though Gideon had a bad game, I would still trust him to be a very good run defender, and he has been in the past, but sometimes good players have bad games. So,
and he's still pretty young, too. So
yes.
And switching now to a guy who's not so young, Everson Griffin, who we haven't really heard from much at all the last few weeks. What is going on with him? He's been really quiet. Production's been way down. He seems like he's still getting off the ball pretty quickly, but is there something wrong with him? Is he just not the same player as he used to be, or is just kind of a down stretch for him?
That's a good question because last year there was a very good argument that Everson Griffin was the best 4-3 defensive end in the NFL. And personally, I would say it was probably either him or Cam Jordan, or just two fantastic. Griffin is a fantastic pass rusher, fantastic. He's one of he's got the teaching tape on the speed to power move, just setting him up with speed to the edge and then converting that to a bull rush into the quarterback. He's fantastic at that. And I also think ever since Dwight Freeney retired that he's got the best spin move in the NFL. So he's a very technically refined and extremely athletic, powerful pass rusher and an underrated run defender, disciplined, smart. And last year he was not just playing at a Pro Bowl level. I thought he was playing at a first team All Pro level. I think he wound up being second team All Pro. This year he's not, and that's sad to see. And part of that is because of his missing time for personal reasons and mental health. But part of that, I'm just not sure. Because he was fantastic in the Lions game. That game we had 10 sacks. He was a big reason why. And maybe he only had 1 or 1.5 sacks that game, but he might have led the team in pressure. So that was a fantastic game from him. But other than that, it's been kind of up and down. The Seattle game, he got beat in playing contain on Russell Wilson a couple times. He made the wrong read, I think, on some zone read plays. Usually when you've got such a mobile quarterback like Russell Wilson, the pass rush plan is coordinated such that the edge rushers are kind of they only take the outside angles. You don't want to rush inside when you're rushing as an edge rusher because then the quarterback can kind of scramble out from the other side. So and there was one instance where Griffin beat the left tackle inside, and then Russell Wilson just escaped to the outside. So some kind of mental errors like that, and we saw him get a false start, I think, last week, which is something he's always trying to get away with, timing the snap perfectly. So that's something he does sometimes. But you're seeing a little more mental errors. It's weird because it's not like he's slowing down athletically. It's not like it's Chad Greenway how he was his final year. Griffin is 30, so. It's not that his age is catching up to him. It's just I'm not sure. Maybe he just needs a full off season to get back into the swing of things, get back into football. But given his age and given how much we're paying him, I think it's $12 million next year. He's probably a prime contract restructuring candidate. So we'll see how things go. He's obviously got the potential to be one of the best in the league, but so far since he's returned, it's been we've seen flashes of that, but nowhere near the consistency we saw last year.
And yeah, you touched on what I was going to get into as far as will he be around next year? I mean, like you said, he could definitely restructure his contract. I think he's a leader on the defense still. Everybody loves him, as far as we can see. So, but at that price and with all the restrictions the Vikings have as far as cap space goes, Mike Remmers could both be looking at, either a different team or a contract restructure at the very least. So
yeah,
it'd be nice to see him just pick it up a little bit down the stretch, and I think he's definitely capable of doing so. And it'll be interesting to see what happens, if he, does play like we know he's capable of, if that impacts what happens down the line. But switching gears here to the offense, or lack thereof, in the Seattle game.
Do we have
to? So what? I was going to say what went right, but nothing really went right. So, I mean, what went wrong with the offense? I mean, I'll just leave it at that. What went wrong with the offense? Do you have any thoughts? Is it any one thing? Is it the whole system? Was it DiFilippo? I mean, was it Cousins? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you probably want to start with Cousins because this was probably one of his worst games on the year. Buffalo's probably his worst game, but this is probably up there. He wasn't, his accuracy was bad. He was throwing some uncatchable balls, and not just on the deep shots, which I can kind of give him a pass for because those are very difficult passes. Even the best quarterbacks only hit those 55% of the time. But the short throws, the throws to Dalvin Cook in the flat, the ball placement when it was catchable was bad. There was obviously the strip sack, which you hate to see more of those. And that one was returned for another touchdown. So that's obviously that was, put the chance of winning from 1% to 0. Pocket presence wasn't necessarily there, although there were times where the offensive line didn't give him much of a chance. But at the same time, he's the one who sets the protection. So a lot of the times it's kind of on him when there's an unblocked pressure. That's often his fault for not either protecting, setting the right protection call, or if he has a hot read, not getting the ball to his hot read. So I do think he probably got a little more criticism than was necessary for this game because it wasn't all his fault. There's one screenshot out there where it was the pass, technically a run play to Latavius Murray, where he gets spun around and he throws it to Murray, and people were saying, "Oh, well, Thielen and Diggs were wide open downfield," and they were, but it was kind of a Norv Turner type play call where it was a 7-step play action drop back. And at the top of his drop, he was immediately pressured because Murray, who's usually a fantastic pass blocker, just whiffed on the block. So Cousins gets immediately pressured. He tries to step up, but he gets hit. He gets spun around by the edge rusher, and he tosses the ball to Murray. And second later, a defensive tackle has him on the ground. So kind of a screwy play, but there wasn't much he could do there. At the same time, though, Cousins was making mistakes left and right. Thielen and Diggs, they struggled to separate, but not necessarily because they played poorly, because, Pete Carroll people don't think of him as like one of the great defensive minds in the NFL because for so long he just had such incredible talent that he just ran kind of a simple, I don't want to say simple, but kind of compared to somebody like Mike Pettin or Zimmer or somebody else, like a pretty simple scheme, that cover 3 scheme. But since Earl Thomas has gone down, they've done a lot of really interesting things. And what they did in this game is they disguised a lot of looks, made Cousins late with his reads. They double-teamed Thielen and Diggs the whole game, which forced Cousins to go a lot to Aldrick Robinson, to Kyle Rudolph, to Dalvin Cook, and Bobby Wagner was off and on Cook. So kind of limited our options. And it was a good game plan. They mixed it up a little bit. There were times when there's a third down where Thielen was double teamed and Diggs was triple teamed. And a lot of times when we say double teams, we think like safety coverage over the safety help over the top, like if it's cover 2, and it's like the corner takes the outside and the safety has can help from up top. Like, no, this was actually like double coverage, like 2 people were assigned to cover him throughout the entire route. So You very, very rarely ever see that, but and usually you don't want to see that because you're selling out completely to stop that player. You do that for like the Calvin Johnsons of the world, and as much as I love Diggs and Thielen, they're not Calvin Johnson. But for Pete Carroll, he just knew that we didn't have many weapons beyond that. So, and then we tried the run game. We've tried everything. Nothing works. We've tried power runs. We've tried trap runs. We've tried outside zone. We've tried inside zone. We've tried basic man, big on big blocking. We've tried sweeps. We've tried traps. We've tried counters, and nothing works. So people want us to run more, and I think DiFilippo was kind of saying like, look, I've tried everything. The short yardage, we struggled, obviously extremely poorly. But there, we tried basic runs, we tried creative runs, we tried simple drop back passes, we tried play action passes. Nothing worked. So I think you can fault DiFilippo for some things on the play in the game design. I think you can fault him for the play sequencing. I think maybe sounds a little conspiracy theory, but you can probably say he ran so much more than he usually did that either he was doing it to appease Zimmer or he was doing it to prove a point about just how unworkable the run game is. So I think you can fault DiFilippo for those things. At the same time, you look at the plays he was running, it's like, okay, mesh, that's like a normal third down short yardage concept. And if we can't execute, that's not on DiFilippo. That's a good call. He had lots of play calls where it's like, this is, you see this from any other NFL offense. You see this from Sean McVay. You see this from Doug Peterson, and it works for them. So it's not necessarily the play call, but maybe the play sequencing, the offensive preparation, those kinds of things. That resulted in, and anytime you go into a game and you score 0 points against not an elite defense, like a solid defense, but maybe not even a top half defense, and you don't score until garbage time, then yeah, after a season of offensive disappointment, you're going to be tough to keep your job. So just a lot of things kind of went wrong all at once.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was just horrible to watch. It's like you said, the play sequencing. I just wanted to touch on that because the Vikings seem to have a lot of second and longs for whatever reason. A run play gets stuffed, or they have a run that goes for 10 yards and it gets called back for holding. And then it seemed like most of the time it seemed like they tried to follow it up with another run on second and long. And that was frustrating to watch. And it seemed like kind of a staple of DiFilippo up to I guess this week that he kept doing that. So I guess that was a little frustrating to watch as well. Obviously he didn't do it every second and long, but if you decide to pass there, the defense is bringing the blitz, it seemed like. And I kind of wanted to touch on this too. Kirk Cousins just seems like he's panicking. And I don't know if that's going to change. We mentioned the run game not going. The offensive line seems better in pass protection. But is it really going to make a difference if Cousins not feeling that pressure and he's just panicking, in these big situation games? I don't know. What are your thoughts on Cousins? Does he look like he's panicking to you? He doesn't seem like he has the confidence that he did week, 2 at Green Bay, or, like when he was playing well. It seems like a year ago already.
Yeah, it's no secret that the offensive line could use some help. I don't know if you saw this, but Eric Kendricks tweeted out earlier today and then deleted it.
Did he delete that?
J-Ron Curse tweeted out, like, you can play me linebacker, nickel, slot, outside corner, safety, I can play whatever. And Kendricks quote tweeted him saying, like, can you play guard? Can you play center?
Yeah.
It's just like, geez. Of course, Kendricks deletes it because it's a funny joke, but he doesn't want to, put our guys on blast. But it's no secret that the offensive line struggles. There are a few plays Cousins probably threw the ball sooner than he needed to. It wasn't Christian Ponder seeing ghosts. It wasn't so bad. But there were like the goal line sequence at the end of the game where we went 4 downs and weren't able to punch it into the end zone. Cousins definitely pulled the trigger earlier than he needed to, and he's not really one to try and extend plays unnecessarily. And I think that's a result of him knowing that the offensive line often isn't going to give him time. So he's never been really somebody with kind of just the natural sense of spatial awareness of where's the pass rush coming from and are they about to hit me from behind or from the side. So
and
maybe seeing ghosts is too strong of a language, but it's definitely not a strength of his.
And that kind of surprised me this offseason because the Vikings knew that about Cousins when they went out and signed him, and yet they didn't spend many resources on improving the offensive line. And I know they couldn't have predicted like your Nick Easton injury, things like that. But I was a little surprised that they didn't go out and really bolster the offensive line when you have so much invested in your quarterback, your new franchise quarterback. So it still kind of boggles my mind a little bit. And if they don't really address it again this offseason, I think a lot more fans are going to be calling for, Spielman and maybe Zimmer's head, just because it's been frustrating to witness.
Yeah, we've Spielman and the draft scouts and the pro scouts have done some phenomenal jobs. Obviously, Diggs, Thielen, that's about as lucky or as talented as you can get as a scout, finding two all-pro talent receivers from the end of the draft or from the undrafted pool of free agents. But the offensive line, they keep making moves, and none of them really. I mean, Reef, they spent top dollar for a middle-of-the-road tackle, and he's probably, he's our best tackle, and he's not bad, but is he worth $12 million a year? Probably not. Remmers was actually a pretty decent signing when he was at right tackle, but whoever decided to move him to guard, that was a terrible decision, and we know that now.
Thank you.
That with some confidence now that. And even, in fairness to Remmers, he's gone up against Ndamukong Suh, and he's gone up against Aaron Donald and Mike Daniels and Akeem Hicks, and week after week, it's just a murderer's row. But when you account for that, he's just not been good enough. Compton's been a pleasant surprise. Elfline, people kind of are worrying about, Elfline's long-term. I think the fact that he was banged up and wasn't able to attend OTAs or get into strength training or recover much, that was killer for him. So I'm hopeful that in his third year, he'll be able to have a full off season and be able to train and get up to speed, because I think from the mental aspect and from the athletic aspect, you like the long-term prospects there. But right now it's true that he's playing at a very poor level for a center, even with the highlight reel blocks he has. And then O'Neal, he's got the athleticism and he hasn't given up a sack, but he's just giving up way too much pressure and he just gets bulldozed by below average defensive ends. So it's a tough situation. And the front office has made moves. They signed guys like Alex Boone, Mike Remmers. It's just that they traded for Brett Jones. It's just that these guys are not really able to contribute in meaningful ways. So it's tough.
Yeah, that's some great points there. And what are your while we're on the subject, what are your thoughts? I'm of the belief, and I'm standing firm with it because I'm stubborn, that the Vikings they have to go offensive line. Number one, I don't care if the guy's projected 4th round pick. Go offensive line first round because we need it. I mean, come on. I mean, I looked back, the last 16 years, they've taken one offensive lineman in the first round, and that was Matt Khalil. And it seems like it just shows it's caught up to him. I mean, obviously I'm being, I'm stretching it a little bit, but do you think we have to go offensive line? The Vikings have to go that route, or am I just being too emotional?
I mean, I don't think we really need a tackle. I'm pretty excited about Brian O'Neal's long-term prospects, even if he's below average right now. I think he could very quickly become a Pro Bowl quality talent. And Reef is solid. He's expensive, but he's solid. It's just the guards are, not good enough. Compton's been surprisingly. If we could keep Compton for vet minimum or near it, that would be a good move. I'd be happy starting him going forward. And maybe Nick Easton can be brought back at a reasonable contract, even though Nick Easton was kind of like how Elflein was last year, where it was just very inconsistent and some highlight reel blocks and then some getting bulldozed or completely losing his block immediately in the pass game. And hopefully Elflein gets better in the offseason, but you can't bank on that. So, yeah, I think we definitely need to ideally pick up a day one starter on the interior. So, I mean, if Eric Kendricks is tweeting about it publicly, then, yeah, it's no secret. We need help there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it'd be a pretty exciting pick if they did go that route. But anyway, getting back on track here, we kind of covered DiFilippo a little bit. Was there anything more that you wanted to add with his departure? Are you sad to see him leave?
I am. I think he was a good coach, and I think he was made the scapegoat because there were a lot of issues. And, that's not to say that he did a good job, because obviously the offense was spectacularly disappointing, and there's a lot of blame to go around on that. I think a lot of people, put it this way, I think a lot of the media and fans, offenses are very sophisticated and complicated. And when you looked at the individual play calls, I think a lot of what DiFilippo was doing made sense on paper. It just wasn't translating. And it's tough to say if it wasn't translating because of something, maybe DiFilippo wasn't preparing the offense right, or maybe he and Cousins were just never on the same page, or maybe Cousins is just, maybe he should be the one to be having the fingers pointed at him. Or the thing that really gets me is how are we so good with Case Keenum last year with basically the same offensive line? Keenum was actually under more pressure for dropback than Cousins was this year, and it, we made it work. And Pat Shurmur was a fantastic coach, but, look at him this year. He's got a bad offensive line, and it's caused a huge issue for the Giants. So I don't get it. The Texans actually are under more pressure than the Vikings are. They're looking at like the 3 seed, maybe even the 2 seed in the very competitive AFC. So it's tough to say exactly. And at a certain point, we analysts kind of have to admit that we don't know everything, and this is kind of something that's it's tough to figure out ultimately, like why didn't it work out? So, and I feel for him, it's getting fired is never fun for anybody on a personal level, and it's disappointing for him because he was somebody who was looked at as like the number one head coaching candidate, and he seems like a good guy and a smart guy. So it's tough, but at the same time, you put up a performance, your offense puts up a performance like that, you're not, the NFL's an up or out system, so it kind of had to be done. I get it.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on all fronts there. And I'm just trying to think back. I watched him at training camp, and it seemed like from the start, it was almost a struggle right from the start. He was showing frustration after just a few practices. And I think a lot of it was the offensive line. And I'm a little surprised that he didn't, work with them a little bit more as far as play calling goes, and just I don't know, maybe he did all he could. Maybe this is just a thought I had, but it seems like Shurmur was able to, and we'll get to it in a little bit, but Shurmur was able to utilize the strengths of the players, I guess, maybe a little bit more than DiFilippo was. And I don't know, it's sad to see him go. Like you said, you never want to see a guy get fired, and he could end up being a great head coach someday. But
yeah,
it's in the past now, and we now have Kevin Stefanski, and by the sounds of it, at his press conference today, he's going to try and bring some of that Pat Shurmur-like mentality to the offense, which I'm pretty excited about. You have quick thoughts on Stefanski?
Yeah, well, it's clear Stefanski and Shurmur were very like-minded coaches. Shurmur wanted Stefanski as his offensive coordinator, and they gelled really well in 2017. I think Stefanski was really tied to Keenum's success as well. He was kind of what DiFilippo was for Wentz and Nick Foles. That's kind of who Stefanski was for Case Keenum last year, turning these pumpkins into Cinderellas. It's exciting to see if that can translate from a schematic and play calling perspective. Stefanski hasn't gotten his shot, but he's been somebody who's been a rising star for a while now. So it'll be interesting to see if he can jumpstart the offense at all. We've seen that already a couple times this year with Freddie Kitchens in Cleveland. The Browns are just completely different offense. And we've seen that we've seen that with the Cardinals. We've seen that with a couple different offenses. At the same time, what do I know? I'm just like an amateur with too much time on his hands. But when I review the offense, I think like this is a fine play call, and we're just not getting it done. So I don't know. My gut would tell me that changing the coordinator isn't going to help, but my Homer fandom is saying like we're going to the Super Bowl because that's what the Ravens did. So.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of the perfect time to do it. Well, I shouldn't say perfect time. It had to be done. And
this way we get a shot at Stefanski and we see if we want him to be the guy next year. So
exactly.
From a planning perspective, it makes sense. So
yeah, absolutely. And I was pretty impressed with his press conference today. He talked a lot about different coaches he had worked with in the past and how he's trying to be a product of all of them. And I thought that was pretty cool. And, it would be a pretty cool story, too, to see it work out and the Vikings make the playoffs, make a run with him at the, running the offense. I think that would be a pretty cool story.
Definitely.
But looking forward to Sunday here, what is the Vikings game plan? Do you have any idea? I mean, none of us really have any idea what's going to happen. Do you have any thoughts or feelings either way of, is he going to try to run the ball more? What's the Vikings offense going to look like Sunday?
I imagine because one of the refrains about DiFilippo is he hates running the ball, that we might see more running because Stefanski, if Stefanski is a Shermer disciple, Shermer did like to run the ball, and he ran it a lot. And even though we were so much better passing the ball than running the ball last year, he loved to run the ball. So we'll probably see a little bit more of that if Stefanski likes Shermer as much as he seems to admire him. The Dolphins are a unique team in that they have a winning record, which is kind of scary given our track record with winning teams this year. But at the same time, there's a lot of reasons to think they're not as scary as their record might indicate. You just saw their game against the Patriots last week, which was a fantastic finish to a game with the lateral miracle play. And things like DVOA or offensive, defensive DVOA, their Pro Football Focus grades, their ELO ratings, they're kind of below average across the board. Not like terrible, but like 20th, 25th range. So, and the other thing is they're kind of like a very, I don't want to say generic team, but like take Ryan Tannehill. He's good at a lot of things, but he's not like elite. He doesn't have like an elite arm. He's not. He's accurate, but you wouldn't put him up with Drew Brees or anything. He's pretty smart pre-snap. He's pretty smart post-snap. He's got some good athleticism. He's like the most like average quarterback there is. So that can be a challenge because there's no real weakness to exploit. But at the same time, there's nothing necessarily that scares you about that. The defense has a couple key players. Rashad Jones, even though he's having kind of a bad year, he's kind of like there was a time where he was the prototypical run-stuffing safety. He's still good. Minkah Fitzpatrick is just a chess piece. Can play anything. He's kind of like a Tyrann Mathieu mold, where he'll play slot corner, he'll play outside corner. They move him all over. I imagine he'll match up with Thielen just because of. Not necessarily because Thielen is the scariest weapon, but because Thielen is the one we like to move around the field the most. So I might suspect if that's what happens, we might be seeing a big game from Diggs. But yeah, this is a team. It'd be interesting to see how Stefanski handles it because we can probably attack him a few different ways, and I'm curious to see how we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, looking at this Dolphins team on paper, I mean, there's not much to be concerned about, is there? I mean, Frank Gore looks like one of their biggest playmakers. Am I wrong there?
Yeah.
I mean, They obviously
Yeah,
have Devontae
they're
Parker.
they're not they're not world beaters. I don't want to go too far, and it's like the Bills. We said they didn't have anybody, and then Jerry Hughes makes himself look like Chandler Jones or Reggie White or something. So um, they're a good team. They have some weapons. They've got the thing is with them is they've kind of um, they have a lot of players who you would say are very good, but at the same time they're just not playing to what their either their draft stock or what their status was before they signed with the Dolphins. Guys like Robert Quinn had a few years where he looked like just a defensive player of the year candidate, and then he kind of fell off. Rashad Jones kind of the same thing. Cam Wake, he was good, but now he's kind of getting old. Laramie Tunsil was the number one overall prospect in was that 2017 when he was drafted, and then he slid, and now he was a guard, and now he's back to tackle, and he's having an okay year, but he's not having like the bona fide number one future Hall of Famer year. So it's a lot of things like that. Devontae Parker, we liked him coming out of the draft. Kenny Stills, they have weapons. Frank Gore is never ending production, and Kenyon Drake obviously is a weapon. But there's nobody on there that's like, wow, this is like got to shut this guy down. So
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
it's not a team you want to take lightly. They can beat you in a lot of different ways, but it's not a team. I would say it's a balanced team. It's a balanced team that doesn't necessarily have all pro talent, but that means they can beat you in a lot of different ways too. So
yeah, very good point. And it just seems like it's a matchup on paper that the Vikings have beat in almost every aspect, but we've thought that before and didn't work out so well.
yeah,
So
yeah. On paper, the Vikings are one of the most talented teams in the NFL, and in reality, we
yeah,
don't have a winning record. So
very true. So that actually brings me to my next point, the injury report. The Vikings are looking pretty dang healthy. I mean, everybody practiced today, which is pretty cool. Chad Beebe came back from his hamstring injury. It's not for sure yet that he's going to play Sunday, but it's looking good. Because he's back at practice so early in the week, and everybody else looks like they're going to play. Richardson said for sure he's playing. And I kind
Trey
of
Wayne's
wanted to touch
his
on.
concussion.
Yeah, that's
David
a huge
Morgan.
return. Morgan. I mean, things are looking up injury wise for sure. And I
Yeah.
wanted to touch on BB because a lot of folks, I shouldn't say a lot of folks, but some people like me think that he could be the team's number one or number one, maybe the team's number three receiver, rather than Treadwell or Aldrich Robinson. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think BB could get to that level if he's healthy?
I would say a lot of our receivers are very good at very different things. Treadwell is not a burner. At this point, we kind of know what he's good at and what he's not good at. He's a pretty good blocker. He'll find the
So
soft spots in zone. His routes are decent. He's pretty good. He's got good stopping power, which, he can't go fast. So how great is it being able to decelerate to 0 on a dime when you can't go to 60 very fast on a dime? But, his routes are pretty good. He's got a decent catch radius, even if he does have drops issues. But he's got the qualities you kind of want in your split end X receiver, faces press coverage, that type of guy. So that's why he probably sees the most of his snaps. Aldrich Robinson's a burner. He can get open deep. He can track the ball well. He can catch the ball well. Great find by our pro scouts finding him because he was kind of like, who is this guy? And now he's catching 3-4 touchdowns this season. BB is kind of different. He's kind of like a prototypical slot receiver type in that he good route runner, good understanding of leverage, seems to get open just in tricky little ways. Not like an ankle breaker the way Diggs is, but kind of like a Thielen type route runner where, not to compare them because they're both white slot receivers, but because like they just have good understanding of how to set up their routes, how to use the defender's leverage well. Those little whip routes that he ran for first downs when he was getting a lot of play time last time we saw him. He's really good at that stuff. all that's to say, like, our wide receiver 3 kind of depends on the situation. If it's a run play, we probably want Treadwell out there. If we're trying to take a shot, we probably want Robinson out there. If it's like a pivotal third down, we probably might want Beebe out there. So um, it's an interesting way to see how he comes, how we use him as a weapon, and how he develops as a player.
Yeah, I completely agree. And with Stefanski taking over as OC, it seems like another weapon for him to use. I mean, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that. Is we could have a different third wide receiver depending on the situation. I kind of wanted, and speaking of Stefanski and utilizing his players, why don't we see more Murray and Cook on the field at the same time? I know Matthew Collar brought that up in his latest article about how Stefanski can improve the offense, and I thought that was a great point by him, honestly. I don't know why that's not happening more.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think generally when we want to go into 21 personnel, we want CJ Ham on the field just because he's more of a H-back, fullback type. He's a better blocker, I think, in the run game. But I would love to see Cook used as a wide receiver. I think he's not an elite route runner or anything, but I think he's a versatile weapon, and I think he's the kind of talent of somebody like Alvin Kamara, where you get him the ball in space and he'll take off. So I would love to see him use more, split him out into the slot, move him out wide, have him run routes, have him run slant routes, post routes, get him open, have him run vertical routes, wheel routes. I would love to see all that stuff. So. And then Murray from the backfield, he's a fantastic pass blocker. He's a good pass catcher. He's not like a great receiving threat necessarily, but he catches the ball well, and he's extremely athletic. So he can be a weapon as well. So I saw that same idea from Collar, and I really think from Matthew Collar, and I really think they can both be used effectively at the same time on the field. So yeah, I would love to see that.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point there by saying use Cook in different ways. I guess DeFilippo seems like he has always just like the swing pass. It's like that. I mean, it's like swing pass after swing pass in the backfield. It's like, oh man, you got to get him open, but you do it in different ways, like you said. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, use Cook like a slot receiver. His average depth of target should be positive, not negative. Put it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I don't mind if he's running quick in routes or hitches or something, but at least move him past the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So, what are your thoughts on the rest of the season? You have a good feeling about this last 3-game stretch?
Yeah, I like that we're in control of our own destiny. We've got the 6th seed now, but we've got 3 or 4 very good teams breathing down our necks, so we can't really slip up. That's not to say that every game's a must-win. We can still make it into the playoffs if we drop one. And I don't know. I think the defense has played outstanding, and we've seen glimpses from the offense. And this is the kind of team where if we do make the playoffs, this is the kind of team that could gel at the right time and make a run. I really do believe that. I think we're just as talented as we were last year when we went 13-3 and made it to the championship game. So we'll see. I guess it starts now with our new offensive coordinator and see how that goes. But I think we've got a lot of potential. At the same time, knowing the Vikings, I am hoping for the best, but not expecting a deep playoff run, put it that way. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. They haven't played up to their potential yet, and once they do, and if they could do it consistently, they could be super dangerous in the playoffs. I guess the one thing that scares me is that the Packers are still alive, but that's a whole other subject. But Nick, that's about all I've got. Was there anything else that you'd like to touch on?
No, I think that covers a lot of it. Obviously, another eventful week in Vikings football with DeFilippo firing. And what's funny, when you play so many broadcast or primetime games that everybody's watching, you get the post game dissection and moratorium on like what happened. Everybody wants to talk about like what's going wrong with the Vikings, and it's kind of exhausting. So it'll be nice to have like just a nice home game where we're favored by like a touchdown, and we can kind of just keep the results to ourselves and not have every analyst being like, "Well, I think the Vikings blew up because of X, Y, or Z," and like um, I'm excited to just have like a quiet, non-prime time game.
Stay under the radar a little bit. Yeah, I
Exactly.
completely agree. All right, well, that's it for the show tonight, and join us next week. Hopefully, we'll be discussing a win over the Dolphins, and then who do we play next week? I guess I don't even know after the Dolphins.
Lions.
Is that the Lions? Yeah.
Yeah,
So we'll be looking forward to the Lions and hopefully another 10-sack performance on Matthew Stafford. Right. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Nick. Thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you next time.
Guys.
Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. We shall see. I think we're probably. Yeah, it looks like we're still live on YouTube.